So, I'm late to this. I'm going to be late to a fair amount of stuff just because lots going on. And no, I'm not going to talk about it because a fair amount of it is personal life. I'm fine. None of it's bad. I'm just busy. So, Ironheart. I am only going to talk about the first 3 episodes. Yes, I know. I'm getting to this so late. The entire series is out. Vera, why don't you talk about the whole thing? Because I have other stuff to do. I can't binge all 6 episodes, and I got to start getting stuff out. And also, the first 3 episodes were released as a block, so I think I'm allowed to review them as a block. This has picked up on its back half. No, not even its back half. In its last episode. The first episode was very introductory, which, yeah, okay, I suppose it needs to be. I will give it credit that it doesn't dwell too much on Riri's history that we saw happen in the second Black Panther movie, because it doesn't really matter. As long as you get the basics, genius, trying to follow at least technologically in the steps of Tony Stark, has experience in Wakanda, but we don't need to get into it, and then we just move forward. I think it chose its battles well in terms of what to lay out, and it spends way more time establishing new background history stuff. Her roots in Chicago, some tragedy from her past, her family, etc., etc. So I think that was a good call. Second episode felt like filler. I mean, a lot of what goes on to it starts to have more meaning by the third episode, but the second episode had me concerned because it felt like the kind of thing that would have been fine in a normal full season of television. And yes, I know full season these days means maybe 10 episodes if you're lucky. But in something that is a 6-episode miniseries, it felt like, is this really what we should be spending time on? It's not the only thing that I'm like that. I feel as good as it is, I feel the same way about the second episode of Torchwood Children of Earth, which is a weird freaking thing for me to bring up in comparison to Ironheart in the MCU of all freaking things. But still, just saying, it happens. But also doesn't necessarily sink anything. The third episode where the connections really started to be made and the threads really got pulled together. It shows a lot of promise by the end of the third episode. So where do we want to start? Well, Riri is consistent with how she was in Black Panther, and a little arrogant, a little cocky. You get the sense that is from her being as young as she is, and that it's an attitude that has gotten her so far, but it is also at times an impediment. I actually I appreciate that she's just allowed to mess up, make mistakes sometimes. Not that I want to imply that, boy, people are going to misinterpret that as being like, because in MCU and Disney, they never let the women ever make mistakes. No, they do. I mean that more in terms of heroes in general. I think a hero is very boring if the only time things go badly for them are circumstances that they could not help at all. I think it adds depth for characters to make mistakes, to screw up. And she does in ways that are reasonable. Because the way you can do that the wrong way is to have a character just do something so foolish that it breaks the immersion of believing them as a real person. Because it feels like a mistake they made for the sake of the plot, as opposed to something they do as a character and as a person. And they handle her really well, actually. I'm a little mixed on Natalie. So Natalie was Riri's childhood friend who unfortunately died in a drive-by that also claimed the life of Riri's stepfather. And, well, first of all, are they going to go there? I'd like them to. I doubt they will. It's frickin' Disney. They won't go there in terms of whether the connection was more than friendship. But anyways, the idea of the way Natalie's brought back is that Riri tries to create this more advanced AI from scanning her own brain. But because her mind was, since she was back home, was really dwelling on the friend that she lost, the AI that was created was effectively a recreation of Natalie. Natalie, as she remembers her at any rate. And the show has started to touch and hint on some of the wrinkles in that, and I hope they'll do it more because, I really hope, and I would love for this show to confront the reality that this is not a perfect recreation of Riri's best friend. This is not a perfect recreation of Natalie. This is a recreation of what she experienced of Natalie. It's kind of touched on it a little bit because Natalie has said, like, there's gaps, but the show also kind of leaned on the idea that the gaps are like she doesn't fully know what happened to her and how she died. But I wanted to more acknowledge the fact that anything that Natalie experienced that Riri wasn't there for or wasn't told about later isn't going to be part of this version of her. Like, if you want a really good dive into the exploration of that, although it's a dark and kind of depressing exploration of that, I'm not saying I want this show to go that bad, but there is a Black Mirror episode called Be Right Back. So I kind of want them to explore those ideas, not to the same end for the same conclusions, because that one's a very harsh and uncomfortable examination of grief. I don't necessarily want that, but I would like to see those ideas explored. And there's hints that they might be. We'll see. We will see. But the banter and the dynamic between them is pretty good. Is pretty solid. I like that. There's also a good rapport between the criminal gang members that she gets involved in. So this is all headed by the Hood, who is a comic villain that I am not super, like, I know a little bit about him, but I'm not super familiar with him. I do know that he has a basically demonic hood that grants him a number of powers, such as turning invisible when he holds his breath, and a few other things. But it's also, it's a demonic hood. It's, it's like having a cursed item in D&D. Yeah, you get to do some cool stuff, but this ain't good for you. And we don't have the full details on that, but it's definitely hinting at it. But he's charming, which is well done. I always kind of like when these sorts of criminal gangs are that they are charming. And part of what I like about that is it makes the point at which Riri gets on the bad side of these people and they turn on her, it'll make it more impactful if she wasn't standing around them being like, boy, these people are intimidating and I feel real unsafe. It plays so much better if she's like, yeah, these people aren't too bad. But then when they no longer have a reason to trust her, to give her benefit of the doubt, to keep her around, to watch that turn is something that I really like. And we haven't fully gotten it because the one she has to confront in the third episode is, what was his name? John, which is Hood. Parker is the guy's real name. Parker's brother, I think. Pretty sure. Sometimes I watched this yesterday, so I'm self-doubting a little bit here. But he was the one who was allowed to be a bit more intimidating across the board. As a figure, he was probably the least charming. I don't mean that like as a knock on the actor. I mean like by design. So I want her to get confronted with how nasty the rest of them are going to get with her. Again, that's what I would hope to see. So interesting call, them bringing in the son of Obadiah Stane, of all characters. Reminder, that was Jeff Bridges' character from the very first Iron Man. The Tony Stark built this in a cave with a box of scraps. That guy. Apparently he had a son who's an adult now and has some connection to what his father used to do, but also is very put off by what his father became. So I'll be curious to see where that goes. They've done some interesting things with it, which is that he has kind of a meek personality, and Riri kind of encouraged him, stand up more for yourself. But one of the first things he does when he starts doing that is basically blackmail Riri. So that immediately bit her in the rear end. That's the kind of thing that I mean, where yeah, that was probably not a great idea for her to empower a guy who could mess with her. And that's kind of what I meant by her making mistakes and having reasonable consequences for them. So I'm curious as to how much further they're going to go with that. Because right now it's kind of okay. Normally that's a reveal that might make me roll my eyes. I didn't in this case because it did make it feel like there was more of a reason for this guy to be around. Whereas before, after he takes up a big chunk of the first step. No, not the first, the second episode. And it was one of those things where I was like, why is this here? Then we find out a little bit more about him, like, oh, okay. So, like, thematically, it kind of makes sense then, because Riri is kind of, she didn't know Tony Stark, but symbolically is kind of carrying on his legacy. And here she is confronted with the man who tried to kill Tony. So, the son of the man who tried to kill Tony. So, like, there's this carry on of two opposing legacies. And, like, oh, okay, so there is a reason this guy's here. All right. We'll see if they actually do pay off for that. That's sort of my big worry. The MCU shows they've been really bad at climaxes and really bad at payoff. They've dropped stuff fairly regularly, and the climaxes are almost always terrible, even in the good ones. So I am nervous going into the back half, but it's pretty solid. It's pretty solid so far. At least by the time I was done with episode 3. Again, first 2 episodes, I was kind of like, yeah, it's fine. End of the 3rd episode, I was kind of getting invested. I was kind of going, okay, all right. And that's part of the reason why I actually wanted to just talk about the first 3, since this was what was initially presented, was a block of 3 episodes. This gives me a chance to, basically say what I would have said if I'd watched them when they first came out. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't bring this up. Riri leaving John behind to die. I really like the tone and the mood of that, and I really hope that the back half really grapples with this, because this was not really an act of self-defense. Because she did defend herself from him, but leaving him to die was a choice that was made. You could actually kind of argue it might have even been Natalie's choice, since Riri was kind of suffocating at the point that she got extracted. But I want this to get confronted. Whether it is guilt directly on Riri's part for what happened, or if she confronts Natalie for the fact that Natalie just left him there to die. He didn't have to die and a choice was made. Now, I'm not saying Riri needs to come to a conclusion that the wrong thing was done, but I need this to be grappled with. I want that so bad. And we'll see if the back half holds up. Don't know how quickly I'm going to get to it. I will try. I've got so much on right now. There's so much to do. But anyway, thank you very much for listening. Ironheart. You can leave your comments down below. Don't put spoilers for the back half, because like I said, I don't know how quickly I'm going to get to it. But share your thoughts. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. Lovely. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lutfula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Movie Turtle, Oliver B, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Mary Mello, Becky Sparks, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pal Barabajoggle, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. Don't worry, the rats are all fine, but my rat wrangler is not here right now, and I thought we could have Archie say hi. Or not.